afternoon there, and welcome to another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This is your host, Michael Cross, and I am hoping that we have a very stimulating analysis of issues that are facing the American public, and in fact the world public today. Now, before I go on, I would encourage people to check out my website. Yeah, a little bit of self-promotion. That's at michaelcross.net. Okay, michaelcross.net. You can also check out my YouTube channel at, well, just type in Michael Cross. And in the Google search, it would be the Michael Cross that comes up under Freedom from Conscience and so forth, the name of my book series. But anyway, what I'd like to do, speaking of my book series, is go into detail about psychopaths. Yes, you know, my fictional series deals with a protagonist, a female protagonist who is essentially, well, at least has a lot of the traits of a psychopath and is committed to actually having strong ethics and doing, basically, maybe you could say, doing the right thing for sometimes the wrong reason. But anyway, if you want to find out more, just go to my website at michaelcross.net. What I'd like to do today is deal with the issue of what 10 occupations you're most likely to find psychopaths in. That's right. What occupations seem to attract people with the personality traits of a psychopath? Now, I'm not saying, I'm just going to say right off the bat, that I'm not saying that every single person that is in any of these occupations is a psychopath. I'm just saying that according to some research, it seems that there are occupations that just seem to attract them. Maybe in the same way that a highly creative person who's, schizotypal, sees things just out of the ordinary, as opposed to the way regular people see the world, is more attracted to art or music and those kinds of things. I've generally found that creative people tend to be a little bit more likely to say that they have bipolar or that they are schizotypal and those kinds of things. And that's to be expected, that, you would have those kinds of people that I'll say have what you could say is, just a personality that they've been given, whether you believe it's just genetics or by God, it doesn't matter, but that their personalities are going to be attracted to areas where they can function better. And so, that's totally understandable. But anyway, the traits that are associated with psychopathy, I'll go over as I'm going through these 10 occupations. Okay? And again, just saying, not everyone you're going to run into in these occupations is a psychopath. It's just maybe a little statistically higher that they are. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. And what I'm going to bring up is an article that was in Forbes magazine. You can find that online, actually. It was published January 5th, 2013. And the title is The Top 10 Jobs That Attract Psychopaths. What I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze each and every one of these. And I'm going to show why it is that these occupations would attract these people. And also at the same time deal with some of the characteristics that are associated with psychopathy. So anyway, let's go ahead and begin here. Of course, the top one that they list, number one is CEO. Okay? People that are at the top of businesses and corporations and so forth. Now, why would CEOs have a greater propensity to be psychopaths? Well, let's just take a look at some of the characteristics of a psychopath. Okay? For one thing, a psychopath is supposed to be someone who has such attributes as being able to be very charming, the kind of person that knows how to use language in a diplomat's sort of way. I just remember, Henry Kissinger, when he defined what a diplomat was, is someone that can say, they tell you to go to hell and you look forward to the trip. Okay, very Machiavellian sort of way of looking at things. But essentially, a psychopath is able to use language very well and charm you. Now, it could be superficial. They may be the kind of person who, at first, they may go to a party and be totally bored with it. That's another trait, by the way, easily prone to boredom. And they go to a party, and someone mentions that someone they've never seen across the room happens to be associated with one of their most important clients. Let's say they're an advertising agency or so forth. Now, they may not feel any desire to go talk to this person. In fact, this person may seem totally either unapproachable or just someone that doesn't excite him or her in the least. But a psychopath would then be able to go over to that person and start a really fantastic conversation in which they truly show that they are interested in whatever that person has to say and whatever that person does and everything about that person. So that person feels like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've met a soulmate, the way that they relate to me. Okay? So they're very, very charming. They also have a very low level of empathy. Now, I say very low. Sometimes people will say they have no empathy, and I disagree with that. I have seen research that suggests, and I believe that a psychopath is able to have empathy and connection with first-degree relatives and people that are close to them. They may be very, very committed to their wife, their children, their mistress. I throw that in because a psychopath is able to determine their own rules for the most part. So therefore, they'll decide what is and isn't proper in regards to society, whether that be a male or female psychopath. And so essentially, the psychopath overall has very little empathy towards other people. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have sympathy. It doesn't mean that they just want to go out there and rape, murder, plunder, and pillage everyone. It just means that your particular problems or your particular concerns don't really matter that much to them, okay? It's not like you talk to them about something that's going wrong at home and they go home, oh, I'm really, I know how Charlie feels about that, because they don't. Okay, they can switch on and off at ease. Other propensities that they have is a lack of guilt. So if they do something, they are not going to necessarily feel all that bad about it. And so they can just go through life, guilt-free. Now, sometimes that's an advantage. I've dealt with this on the show. When people from the left will say, well, you should feel guilty because of this or this or this or this or this. Well, a psychopath, I illustrate this in my first book, where there's a case where the teacher's telling the class that everyone should feel guilty about this one particular aspect of American history, and my character is thinking to herself, and she challenges the teacher, saying, why should I feel sorry for something I had nothing to do with? Okay, doesn't mean that everyone that feels that way is a psychopath. It just means that that's the way they would see life in general. Okay, so you have very charming, goal-setted, many of them are very goal-centered, as opposed to, sometimes you'll see things saying that they just have a flippant view towards life and setting goals and so forth. I don't think that's the case with most of them. The ones that are low intelligence and maybe are not able to set goals and achieve them are the ones that you hear about, in jail, as opposed to the ones that wind up in Congress or in the White House. So anyway, these kind of characteristics would suit a CEO very well. If you've got to close down your division. Let's say you've got a company in, I don't know, Detroit, Michigan. I don't know if they have very many companies there anymore. But let's say you have a company that manufactures things and you employ 100 people and you're psychopathic and you're trying to turn over a bigger profit margin because, of course, a higher profit margin means your stockholders love you more and more money for you. Well, and you get the opportunity to go ahead and either replace all of your workers with robots or transfer your division over to Beijing, China. Well, yeah, you're more likely to be able just to go ahead and close down your division and not really feel that bad about what you've done. You're saying, well, business is business, and not really feel bad about all the people you put out of work. So I guess a CEO that has that mentality, a very goal-driven, I'm going to make money for the corporation. And by the way, corporations, if you actually, since in Western society, most countries today legally see a corporation as an individual, I guess the corporation is in and of itself a psychopath. Okay, I mean, they have all those traits. Look it up. Look up the traits of psychopathy on the internet. Just type in Hare's psychopathy checklist or something, and then compare those to a corporation. And essentially, yeah, it comes up that way. That you may be making a profit in your little company in Detroit. You may be making let's say, outlandish profit of 10% a year, but if you close down your division and move to Beijing with your workforce, your factory instead, and you can raise your profit margins up to 15%, then that's okay. Who cares what it does to the community? So anyway, CEO, I could see where that would be a trait that would be very positive if you were psychopathic. Also, it must be noted that climbing up to the top of the ladder requires the ability to use diplomacy, but also use a little bit of ruthlessness, because you've got to step over all the people that are under you. Not so much under, them too, but the ones that are equal to you and above you, and you need to be able to charm your way up to the top. So therefore, a CEO is going to be someone, if they've made it that high, vice president of a firm or something like that, they didn't probably, unless they were born into it, they didn't get there by just, being a quiet, timid mouse. They had to be more of a lion to get there. And they had to be very committed to that goal. So ultimately, yes, I think it's pretty easy to see that a CEO would be more likely to have these traits. Number 2, according to the article, is a lawyer. Oh my gosh. Anyone that's actually dealt with the legal system, I've always said this. Many people, especially Americans, believe that their legal system is the best in the world until they've actually gone through it. Yeah, I've known so many men in particular, but not just men. I've met a lot of people who've had to go through the family court system, divorces and stuff like that. And maybe they were very patriotic and they were like, America, yay, number one, flags waving, that sort of thing, until they went through it. And, that leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Lawyers are gunslingers, okay? When you go to court with someone, let's say it's a family court, husband, wife breaking up, and they both want custody of the kids, or they both want the house, or whatever. The thing is that ultimately you can't go in there, again, like a quiet mouse. You've got to go in there like a lion, or I would say more like a jackal. You've got to be fierce, okay? Very fierce. And so most people win by choosing lawyers that have those traits. It's like the Old West. the gunslinger that's the best. The townspeople are having trouble with a local gang that's rode into town or something like that. So they hire a gunslinger to clean up the mess. Ironically, at the end of those kind of westerns you may have watched when you were a kid back in the 60s or 70s when they made lots of westerns, oftentimes the gunslinger winds up becoming the local politician after everything's settled down. I'll get into the politicians in just a moment. Now, the thing is, lawyers, again, a lawyer needs to be able to shut off empathy. Think about what the lawyer might feel like towards their opponent. And maybe they feel sorry for that person. Maybe a defense lawyer really knows that the person that they're defending is a real scoundrel. And whether they believe that the man or woman that's sitting there in the defendant's chair is the person that actually did the crime that they're being accused of, very often they know this person has a criminal record and that they should actually not be out in the public. But if you're a defense lawyer, you've got to defend them even though you're looking at the victims, in the courtroom, and their families and so forth. At the same time, if you're a prosecutor, you've got to look at that person sitting in the defendant's chair, and you've got to make sure that you make a case to send them to jail for as long as possible. It doesn't matter that maybe, some people would be moved if someone were to say, well, he or she had a poor childhood, or they were abused, or they just were totally mistreated in life. No, you cannot allow your emotions to get in the way. You've got to go after them. And the thing is that it's so much easier if you don't have emotions in the first place. Okay? If it's easy for you just to put those in a nice little filing cabinet and file them somewhere deep in your brain and then just go at it to win, then you're more likely to win. So obviously a lawyer is going to be more likely to be someone who's psychopathic. And the more successful, the better. Now, the thing is, there are people that go into law, and maybe they are very content just to kind of sit in their little office and take some clients here and there, and they make a modest living. But the ones you hear about are probably going to be more likely to have these traits. And also, the people that are considering law. Many times, people that are highly competitive see this as like, wow, wouldn't this be fantastic? You're kind of like an actor in front of a whole courtroom, and you're able to give this eloquent speech all the time, and everyone's eyes are focused on you. Well, you know what? Psychopaths, that's another trait, a very strong narcissism that's associated with their personality. They like to be part of the limelight. They don't want to be hidden away somewhere and be like, I don't know, a tax lawyer or something like that, and just deal with a lot of business type stuff. They love the limelight. Okay? So growing up, they're watching the lawyers on TV and they're thinking, I could have done a much better job than that guy. I think I'm going to go to law school. Okay? So easy enough. Lawyers, I think that they could fit in there very, very well. Now, speaking of liking a lot of attention, media. That's number 3. By the way, I don't know if these are right in an order or something, but media. Now think about this. In the media, there's a lot of competition too that a lot of people are not really aware of. That if you're a reporter, you want to wind up not just being a reporter all your life, being sent out to interview the girl that grew the biggest pig for the local 4-H fair or something like that. That's not exactly, what you want to do forever until you retire. You must be at least if you're competitive, you're going to want to become an anchor on at first the local news. You're going to want to get in there, and you're going to want to be the kind of person that becomes a celebrity. so that people will watch you. They'll tune in. Your boss is going to be really impressed with your ratings. And then you get noticed and eventually maybe get up to national, the national news where you are, very well paid. Look at the salaries sometimes. Take these people. I'm not going to name any names because then people are going to think I'm saying this man or this woman's a psychopath, and I'm not. I'm just going to say this. Most people have never Googled the salaries that newscasters, and so forth, that they see on national news networks actually make. But I don't care if it's NBC, ABC, CBS, CNBC, Fox, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just for fun, take the name of someone that you see and just type their name in and salary. I just think it's so hilarious that people think, oh yeah, this person, this man, or this woman's a champion of the people. They get on there and tell stories about this and this and this. Well, think about the fact that they are actually part of the 1%, okay? That might make a difference, but try it sometime. Just start Googling and finding out their salaries. I think most of the stuff is out there in the public knowledge. Okay, even though most people in the public don't actually bother to look. But think about that. You become a celebrity on TV and everyone's watching you or they're listening to you if you're in radio. And, you get an adoring audience that loves your persona that you're presenting. And that very much would attract people that are psychopathic because they like that adoration, that narcissistic supply that the audience is giving them. Okay? And on top of this, let's, since we're talking about the media, celebrities themselves, like actors and actresses and so forth. This is the perfect opportunity for them to be able to be thrown into a role. Now, by the way, I should say this. Since I've already noted that psychopaths are able to really, really, really repress the emotions they do have, it then makes sense that they're able to take on a different persona when they're asked to be, an actor or actress. That they can play the part quite easily. Because a lot of people have a hard time playing something that would be totally 100% not them. But if you're psychopathic, then the thing is that the character you're playing is an extension of a persona that has been lent to you. So therefore, it makes it much easier for you to be a very good and compelling actor or actress, especially if put into situations where there may be a very controversial violence scene or sex scene or something like that. You're able to shut off much easier. And if you're able to have an easier time shutting off, then you're going to have an easier time doing a good job, presenting yourself well, and getting recognition as being a fantastic artist. So, yes, I can see where people that have any, whether they are narcissists or psychopaths, and often they kind of blend together, but regardless of whether they're narcissists or psychopaths, they are going to see anything in, drama. And I'm throwing, hey, look, today's news is infotainment, okay? It's drama mixed with some information, okay? I mean, I don't know who does more accurate acting. Is it an actor that plays the part of, a president of the United States, or is it someone that gets on the news and, gives you this really wonderful opinion or whatever when it comes to the delivery of the news in today's environment. Anyway, still, it's going to be one of those things that psychopaths love. They love the adoration that the public will give them. And think about that. I mean, not just a few people, but a huge audience. Okay? Makes it even better. Number 4, salesperson. Oh, I've often thought that for a person to be really good in sales, they should have a knack for psychology. Because I've worked in sales before, and I have seen that it's possible to sell anyone anything if you do it right. I've had customers that, no way do I want this, blah, blah, blah. And if you use the right sales techniques, you can change their mind. You just have to get into their psychology. You need to be able to find out what they really are saying when they say no to you. Now, let's say you're selling, you got a guy comes onto a car lot, and he's looking for a car. Let's say this. This guy's in his 50s. Looks like he keeps in good shape, and he comes in with his wife, who looks to be maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a trophy wife, 30. Let's say she's 30, and lots of nice makeup and clothes and so forth. Now, psychologically, a lot of people would just say, okay, well, are you looking for a car? And they say, no, just looking. Okay, see you later, and walk off. And that's the salesperson that doesn't make the sale. The person that makes a sale is the person that can go over there, strike up a conversation, start feeding this guy's ego, because you're going to be kind of psychoanalyzing that he's probably someone that wants to come across much younger. He's going to be someone that's probably more interested in younger things. So if you talk to him about things that maybe you would associate 50-somethings to be interested in, probably is not going to work. You're going to want to find things that, because some people say you're as old as your wife. So you're going to look for things that maybe are more 30-something. And then when you start seeing him perk up a little bit, that's when you start aiming him for cars that are going to convey the personality and the persona that he is wanting to convey. Okay? Not the nice, say, family car. You're going to try selling him on something that's going to be noticed out there. Now, maybe not this isn't the case all the time. And you might get wrong. Maybe when he comes on the parking lot, that's his daughter that has accompanied him to buy a car or something like that. But you need to find that out. And a psychopath is more likely, if they know that whoever makes 10 sales on that lot that month will win a free trip to Hawaii for them and their wife or whatever. 10 sales is the win. That person, the psychopath, is going to be way more likely to be able to go over there and charm that person and make them feel the center of the world and at some point seduce them. Okay? Now, the thing is, while not all psychopaths are promiscuous, many are. I mean, statistically, they're more likely to be promiscuous. But sometimes seduction has nothing to do with getting someone in bed. It has to do with seducing their mind and being in kind of a control. I've heard that people like Karl Marx they fit the profile of the cerebral psychopath. I would also tend to think that Aleister Crowley or maybe Charles Manson, because he seemed to be kind of more, he was all over the place. I mean, he was, I'm not sure completely about him, but when it comes to people like Crowley and Marx, they seem to be more the cerebral psychopath. So if you've got someone who's psychopathic and they have that knack for analyzing a situation, finding out what things will really get that person going, and yes, maybe not seducing them physically, but seducing them financially to make a commitment to a car that is going to make that person feel and younger and more vibrant and alive, then that means that you're going to be more successful. And so therefore, the psychopath is more likely to be the more successful person in that line of work. They're also going to be more likely to go into that kind of work because they're going to be told by so many people, oh, you're such a natural, you should go into sales. Wow, you just have a way of convincing people. You should go into sales. You'd make a fortune. So therefore, again, there is that kind of selection process that takes place. And on top of the selection process, the people that make it are the ones who are able to make money for their boss and ultimately for themselves. So therefore, the ones that don't make it, like if you're a salesperson and you're not making it, it's bye-bye. Okay, you're not making a living for yourself, and especially if it's on commission, and you're just wasting time and maybe potential customers for your boss. So therefore, salespeople, of course. Now here's one that really, really freaks people out. Now they say surgeon here. Now I have heard, it was number 5, I've heard that also emergency room doctors, okay, score very high when it comes to psychopathy. But yet, regular nurses and general practitioners are like amongst the lowest on the scale of psychopaths. Now, what differentiates people? Well, it could be the amount of acclaim that is associated with being the guy who saves the day. You know, emergency comes in. You know, I've sat in emergency rooms before. You know, when you've got a family, you know, they get injured and so forth, they get sick on weekends and so forth. So you're in an emergency. I've seen some, you know, interesting cases come in. You know, people that have their wrist cut, you know, and they're bleeding and they're like, hey, doc, I need some help. You know, that sort of thing. But you're also getting car wrecks. You're getting people in all kinds of really, you know, they're almost dead. And, you know, think about that hormonal rush that a person gets when they save that person's life. Does it really matter ultimately if they care about that person? Okay? When I go to the dentist, for instance, and he fixes something on my teeth, do I really care that he cares about me and he's thinking of me, and if he's on my Facebook and you know, whether he sends me a birthday notice or not, that's going to affect my life? Does it really, you know, if he does a good job on fixing something, then so what? But the thing is that when a person in the medical field does something spectacular, okay, when you think of it, in the medical field, emergency room doctors and surgeons, they're like the what they used to call the flyboys in World War II in the medical profession. The flyboys, of course, were the ones who flew airplanes, and there'd be a certain amount of respect and also a certain amount of envy and maybe even displeasure from the regular enlisted men towards these pilots, but still they were the stars in many ways. So therefore, if we look at the medical profession, the ones that make it, the ones that are attracted to this high intensity drama, that, you know, in the media, usually if you have a TV series that's centering on the medical profession, it's like it's set in these kinds of things, surgeons and emergency and so forth. It's something that is going to be far more challenging and almost competitive than someone coming in with a bad case of their herpes acting up or something like that if you're a general practitioner. So I could see where you would have these, and maybe there would be a certain amount of arrogance associated with these professions as well. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go on here. The next one, number 6, journalist. Now, this goes into more newspapers and so forth. But now think about what the journalist job is. The journalist job ultimately is to interpret a news event. Now, I can tell you this much. I've been to news events before. I've made some news events. I've invited people to come and speak to audiences and so forth. And then when the journalists leave, I often ask the audience, hey, watch tonight and see how this is presented in the news. And then I'll do a follow-up the next day. Hey, what'd you think about the news forecast, the news presentation of the event? And invariably people will go, wait a minute, it's like they already had a preconceived notion of what the event was going to be. That's right. That's usually the case. You learn how to do sound bites when you're being interviewed by a journalist. I've had happened many times, and they'll ask questions in such a way that they're trying to fish for an answer the way they want it. The knack you have to develop, obviously, and I think a lot of politicians do, is you have to learn how to do the sound bite in such a way that it conveys your desired presentation. So if they ask a question 100 different ways and you answer it the way that, 100 times the way you wouldn't mind that quote wind up in the newspaper, for instance, then you're successful. And you have to do that. But most people aren't quite that savvy about the way the media really works. So they pick up the newspaper the next morning. And for those that still read the newspaper, I know it's starting to go out of date. But they pick up the newspaper and they look and go, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted them to. This makes me look like an idiot or something like that. Well, that's if you haven't had much experience with these guys. Now, the journalist, again, is kind of a star in many ways because they can be the ones that present reality to the public. And so if you're a if you go into, why else would you go into journalism unless you wanted to be able to present your bias? I mean, that's the way I look at it. You go in there and you can make sure that thousands and thousands of people, when they read your story, are going to get your take on things. And you learn how to take a word and word it in such a sentence and employ it in such a way that it makes sure that your bias is confirmed within the public. Or you just don't, you use propaganda. You use propaganda in a sense that sometimes it's not the story that's presented, it's the story that's not presented. So you interview people that are going to, again, confirm your bias. If you're dealing with, I don't know, lately the Confederate flag's been in the news. And let's say there's a big rally, 1,000 people protesting some aspect that they want the Confederate flag left up somewhere. I don't know. I don't live in the South. So anyway, the thing is that if you really want to make these people look bad, then you just start interviewing and you get someone say, yeah, it's part of a heritage, or someone else that's saying, yeah, well, I just don't think that we should start getting rid of iconic imagery. Then you run into some guy that's just kind of like starts making all kinds of inflammatory statements towards other races. Well, oh, wow, he's got a spot there in the, on the front page. Maybe you can get a picture of him. See, there's a lot of power as a journalist. Remember the old adage, the pen is mightier than the sword. And also, if you pick up a sword, it can actually be quite damaging to you if the other person's better at using it. So the pen, that's where the power is. Okay? It's just like in politics. What would you rather be, a Supreme Court judge or the leader of the U.S. Senate? My gosh, a Supreme Court judge has so much more power. And it's long lasting. So obviously, when it comes to all these areas, you got to consider where the power really lies. And journalists have a lot of power even today, even with alternative media. The journalist has a lot of power. And in alternative media, I don't know if it's necessarily all that different. I've talked to alternative media people, and they've often said, they've told me in confidence, that's why I'm not going to give any names, and I think I might be a little bit psychopathic. Because and it's like, oh, okay, well, usually I'll say, well, no. But you know what? It could be true. It could be true. Because you're trying to step out and you're not part of the mainstream. That's another thing about psychopaths. They don't like to conform. So the person who's totally nonconformist, who just kind of says, I don't care what society says. And then they decide to go into alternative media because they're sick and tired of being told what to do all the time or not getting their message across. Maybe they're more psychopathic. And nevertheless, I think this is why journalists are in there. Okay, the next one, police officers. Oh, wow, grab the taser and the billy club. I can see that. I can see that. Now, normally I have made a distinction, even though in psychology there's really not a distinction between a psychopath and a sociopath. But I've often said that the psychopath is the person who makes the laws and the sociopath is the one that enforces the laws, because the sociopath is more likely to be more physical in trying to get their way. And the thing is that the police work might actually attract people who are, let's just say psychopathic, because it's the ultimate domination. You can dominate people, and it's okay. You can boss people, and you can gain their respect without actually earning their respect. And what I mean by that, and I'm not putting down police officers, okay? I'm saying that there are a lot of police officers who are psychopathic. And the only thing you have to do is look up police brutality videos on YouTube. Now, even if only half of those, it's fair. Okay? Because I've seen some where, especially when the left, I've often thought to myself, and it's usually been confirmed, when the left is showing a case of police brutality, it's more likely that you need to see what happened 5 minutes before. Because often it's police brutality maybe, but there is something else involved that has led to this situation. But there are plenty of filmed cases in which cops have done really nasty things to people who are not doing anything but maybe challenging their authority. Maybe they're scared when the cop comes up, especially if you're a regular, everyday person. And a cop comes up and like in some sort of East German Stasi style is going, may I see your identification papers, or something like that. Now, first of all, I don't believe there's any law that says you have to show a cop identification papers. I mean, I can just imagine. I mean, what are they going to do if they're like at those nude bike rallies they do for the environment or something early in the summer? I don't think those people have too much identification on. But anyway, the thing is, I've never seen that in the United States of America you have to have identity papers on you. I've always associated that with, you go visit China and you have to have, if you're not a Chinese person, I mean, they don't have to carry identification with them all the time, I don't think. But if you're a foreigner visiting someplace like China, you have to, by law, have your passport on you. Okay? But in America, you should be able to go around anywhere you want. And unless you're causing trouble, then you don't need to have any kind of ID. And if you just think about it, the police have this thing about just being able to walk up and intimidate you any way they want. And if you fight back in any way, okay, if they get a little bit too much in your face and they're trying to provoke you and you fight back in any way, even sometimes verbally, you may be down on the ground and missing a couple teeth. Now, that's not the way police were supposed to behave back in the 1970s. The 1980s and the 1990s. But lately, it's gotten a little out of hand. Okay? It's gotten a lot out of hand, I think. And I could see, I've interviewed people on this show that have noted that now it seems that psychopaths are actively recruited because they're the ones who can shut down, shut off, and do the job without any real sense of, hey, I don't think this is really right what I'm doing. Maybe I shouldn't be beating the you-know-what out of this 18-year-old skinny 5-foot-tall college girl because she's protesting at, I don't know, some sort of global conference or something. Okay? The psychopath will react when they are challenged. And they tend to be a little bit sensitive. They're the smarter ones, the ones that wind up in Congress or the Senate. They're going to be the ones who they're more calculating versus the ones who are just going to fly off the handle. But I think you're usually going to get the kind that have a masculinity issue or something. I'm not saying all cops, but there are a significant number that may have masculinity issues that do go into police work. And if they are also, throwing the combination nowadays of steroids and if they have psychopathic traits, just watch out. just try to steer clear of them, perhaps. Okay, number 8 that they have listed here. Number 8, clergy. Oh, now you see that a lot of times people think, well, why would the clergy be more likely to have psychopathic traits? I mean, it seems like that should be the opposite of psychopathy. Well, ultimately, psychopaths are very cognitive based. I've interviewed psychopaths, and a lot of times what they will say is that they have morality, they believe in God, all this kind of stuff. But it's not that kind of guilt-driven morality. I think many people have guilt-driven morality. I do something wrong, I feel bad that I did it. Okay, and it rakes on them, and they're the kind of people that would cry and, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I did this. Psychopaths can be very moral. They can be 100% in favor of the 10 Commandments and doing what is right all the time. But it's because they believe that God is in some way measuring them according to what they know and how they behave. So that's why I say it's a cognitive-based morality. A person could say, let's say you're a man and a woman's, at work is trying to seduce you. Now, maybe a person who is religious and not psychopathic, and they give in. Let's say they give in to the seduction. They're going to be so guilt-ridden. They're going to be crying. They're going to be like, going on some talk show, maybe, like, I can't believe what I did, that sort of thing. Psychopaths wouldn't do that, first of all. If they give in, they're going to justify it. Like, well, the wife was she's been tired the last few weeks, and so, nothing much has happened in that department. So, yeah, I can deserve it. That's the way that they're going to look at it. The psychopath, though, would be more likely, they could actually be someone who would never mess around on their husband or wife. But they are also more likely to say, okay, what would happen to me if I did this and got caught? Or what if I catch a venereal disease? Or what if this, or I get this person pregnant? Or this person falls in love with me and it becomes like a fatal attraction type thing. That's the way they look at morality. And so clergy, first of all, we've dealt with the idea that psychopaths have a certain narcissism about them. Now, clergy, you're seen again. You're much of the clergy is seen in the same sense as a television personality or a journalist or someone like that. People are looking at you. In some churches, you get dress up in nice little robes and, flowing robes, and you're all different, and people are all calling you by different titles and so forth. Well, that's going to be an attraction right there on the narcissistic level. And if the people in your community are like, oh my gosh, Father so-and-so, or they're so wonderful. Well, the kid that might be somewhat psychopathic might be thinking, well, this would be kind of the area to go into. Although to go in, well, I'm not going to go into all the issues of celibacy, stuff like that. But anyway, the thing is, clergy, you may wind up getting these kinds of people. Now, the thing is, you're also going to get a certain level of, like I said, with CEOs, the ones that become very nationally known, for instance. They get a huge following. Maybe they were the ones that were able to employ a lot of competitiveness. They weren't satisfied with just being in their little field. And maybe they're the ones that have more of these traits. But I still think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the clergy may actually get a lot of people who are thinking more in lines with, again, the cognitive functions. And therefore, it's kind of I believe because of this and this and this, and I can present really good arguments for my morality. Therefore, hey, clergy might be a good job. And plus, I get lots of attention, and people are adoring me. So just like the cop gets a lot of attention because he or she carries that gun on their belt and they have the badge and so forth, the clergy, they sometimes wear a collar, or, people just know who they are, and it's just like, oh, here comes so-and-so, and, they're a man of God. And so, yeah, I can see where that could be the case, even though it doesn't make sense at first until you really analyze it. Now, here's one I've never given any thought to, and that's chefs. Okay? I mean, I've known a few people that have trained to be chefs and have started working as chefs, but I'm not really acquainted with and I don't watch any of these reality shows with chefs and stuff like that. But I can see that maybe, again, that whole sense of who makes it to the top. Okay, there's a lot of chefs out there. There's lots and lots of people out there cooking meals in restaurants. But the ones that get acclaim, the ones that get featured on TV shows in the morning, the ones who maybe get their own TV shows, or the ones who, everyone's going, oh, you've got to eat at this one Italian restaurant because they have this one chef that just makes the most delicious calzone, or something like that. Well, the thing is that there I can see where there would be a sifting process in which the people that are the professional chefs, as opposed to just cooks, I know there's not a huge difference, but anyway, that they're getting the acclaim. Oh, what was the name of that kids movie my kids watched a few years ago? Ratatouille or something like that. Where the chef is like, he's like a star. All right. So, maybe that accounts for it. So, I don't know. But the next one I want to spend a few minutes with is civil servants, politicians. Yes. Well, I've already kind of dealt with that a whole bunch of shows. But I think that ultimately the people that make it big time, okay, and there's a certain process. I mean, you might make it on the city council, then someone sees that you're really good and you start developing a following, and like I said, you're a good speaker, and you really put things together and you do well in media relations. Pretty soon you're contacted by the local Republican or Democratic Party because there is a legislative seat that's coming available, and they think you should run for it, and then you run for that one, and then pretty soon, it's like, hey, wouldn't I think you should go for the congressional seat that's opening. And, it's part of a sifting process. And I think was it Franklin Roosevelt that said something about politicians aren't elected, they're selected? Because you get selected through the local parties. And they're looking, again, remember the gunslinger analogy? They're looking for a man or a woman who knows how to think fast on their feet, who's a great orator, that knows how to get their point across and people persuaded. And that's a psychopath. And so therefore, the politicians, I would say, are way more likely to have these traits than I'd say even any of the other jobs I've gone over, even CEOs. Because, a CEO, I think a CEO has to have a certain level of knowledge to make it to CEO. They have to have a certain skill in regards to economics or some other aspects of business. Whereas a politician often can make us look like an expert when they are not an expert. I mean, how many times have you heard a politician make some sort of comment about science or medicine or medical ethics or any number of things And they have absolutely no background in the area, not even an interest. Okay? Not even an interest in those areas. And yet they're seen as experts. They're seen as people who, he's a congressman. He must know what he's talking about. Oh, he's the this or this or this. And so therefore you gain automatic credibility. So if there's an issue dealing with cloning, and it's not unusual for a politician to quote a movie. Oh yeah, there's this movie that was out about cloning, and they're using that as their justification? Come on. The thing is, all the traits I talked about so far when it comes to politicians are fit perfectly with the psychopath, because the psychopath is wanting to gain power, prestige, and so forth, and politics is the way to get it. I mean, not only do CEO can exercise power over their workers and maybe the community. A politician can exercise power over their congressional district or maybe even the entire nation. They can get the nation into wars. They can keep the nation out of wars. They can change the economic structures, the laws. They can make something good or make something bad. That's the power we give politicians. And so if you're psychopathic, that is going to be the ultimate draw. I mean, you've got every single facet of the personality being reinforced when it comes to politics. So I would encourage, we only have a minute left. And again, I would really encourage people to examine psychopathy. Don't just take my word for what it is. Look it up, okay? And I would actually stick with, there's a lot of stuff out there, that's a little bit less than credible. But what you should do is look up, don't do like, these social media, like, are you a psychopath? Because some of those are just like, what color do you like? What's that got to do with psychopathy? What you should do is look up Hare's psychopathy checklist, look at the traits, and then ask yourself, are these traits necessarily negative in regards to someone achieving goals in today's society and in these kinds of occupations? Are they advantages? Are they something that would help people to be able to win, to help them gain what they want in life, in money, in romance, in political power, and all these other things? I think you might be a little bit surprised. I guess the only thing that surprises me is why this isn't taught more in, in political science classes. I think it's taught in psychology classes, but in political science classes it hardly ever comes up, the role of political psychology. But it should, because ultimately it helps you understand politics in a way that nothing else can. Anyway, that wraps it up for this edition of Unlock the Door Radio. And I do really hope that people will tune in again next week and the week after and the week after. And, again, here what we like to do is question the dominant paradigm and do as Benjamin Franklin said, question authority. Anyway, take care, y'all. Bye now.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.